What
Begins,
really is
and
up to
Teresa
now?
decides to become the referee. As soon as the battle begins, Eldo begins to think that the only opportunity he'll get to win is when the examiner uses a skill. While a swordsman's skill is more powerful than a regular attack, they can't change their movements halfway through. But at the same time, if the examiner doesn't use any skills, he'll be beaten into a pulp. Inside, the examiner begins dashing towards Eldo, and he figures that trying to defend would mean defeat. However, if the examiner is swinging downward, it can be avoided just by moving a bit. Just then, Eldo hears the examiner say guard crash, which is a skill that takes down enemies guarding themselves. This gives Eldo the perfect opportunity to dodge the attack and figures that he created an opening on purpose. Furthermore, Eldo is aware that if he can't get a critical hit here, then he can't complain when he fails the test. As expected, he manages to land a critical hit on the examiner, shocking Teresa and sending him crashing onto the ground. While Teresa ends the duel, Eldo is thankful to the examiner for going easy on him, completely unaware that the examiner is actually terrified of Eldo now. However, Eldo still thinks of it as the examiner doing it and thanks him, figuring that he must be a really good person. After that, Eldo questions if he passed, to which the examiner agrees, asking where he learned swordsmanship from, to which Eldo replies that he's self-taught. Apparently, since it was a game, he could swing the sword as much as he wanted without getting tired, and stayed up late swinging the sword instead of his schlong like most of you guys. At this point, the examiner can't believe that he was defeated by a self-taught novice, but Eldo argues that even if the examiner didn't go easy on him. This comes as a surprise to the examiner, and gets reminded by Eldo that he used the guard crusher to lose on purpose. As expected, the examiner has no idea what Eldo is talking about, while he believes that the examiner is still playing dumb. Following that, he gets congratulated by Teresa for passing the guild's admission exam, and she lets him know that starting today, he's a member of the Adventurers Guild. Teresa then gives him his personal guild card that serves as a proof, and after taking a look, he notices that his name is engraved on it along with his rank, that is F for now. Additionally, she asks if he would like to hear the guild's guidelines, and when Eldo agrees, Teresa decides to start off with the adventurer's obligation. Apparently, he is not allowed to submit false reports or divulge confidential information from his client. Lastly, he must obey the laws of the country he is working for. Eldo wonders what would happen if he were to break any of those, and Teresa lets him know that the punishment can range from getting suspended or even banned from registering again. In case of a criminal act, he can even be sentenced to death. Eldo further asks if these three are the only obligations he needs to follow, and questions if it is required for him to provide assistance during an emergency. Luckily, the guild doesn't force adventurers to take requests even during emergencies, and these three are the only obligations they need to follow. With that out of the way, Teresa begins explaining the request's deadline and penalties. Turns out the request will be turned in
I see path!
within the deadline, and if you were to
I
fail
see
the
destruction!
this makes Eldo wonder if he completes a request, but doesn't report it before the deadline, and gets told that the deadline is for reporting, and if he doesn't report in time, it'll be considered incomplete. After she is done yapping about every rule in existence, Teresa hands him a copy of Guild Lines and gets asked by Eldo if she has any fighting manuals. Even though there are some guides he can borrow, Eldo isn't allowed to take them outside without purchasing them. After reminding herself of the commonly used books, she puts two books in front of him that might be of help. Eldo decides to start off by reading the Bestiary, and realizes that the F-rank column is full of monsters he has never heard of, and the same goes for the E and D rank. Additionally, he notices the wolves and some other small fries termed as C rank, making him wonder. Can you tell which app is to trap? Google Play Cam. Download app. Said to tell feeling good to be a guy. We ain't sleeping on the couch. We're just resting our eyes. Additionally, he notices the wolves and some other small fries termed as C rank, making him wonder if this is some sort of joke. Rage Wolf is classified as B rank, reminding Eldo that the player in the game stops being a beginner after defeating one of them. Lastly, he decides to check the rank section and notices that they are all blank. This comes as a relief to Eldo, as there won't be any tough monsters to slurp his guts like noodles nearby. After that, he decides to take a look at the combat manual, and reads through the basic level, beginner level, and the intermediate level. But even after reaching the advanced level, Eldo realizes that this is full of basic stuff. However, after skipping some of those pages, he notices that this is it, and there's no guide about one-on-one battles. Eventually, he comes across a page talking about Miracle Strike, but to his disappointment, finds out that this world's strongest person's critical hit was only 20%, which means that he only graduated from being a beginner. The thought of that person not knowing how to pull off critical hits enters Eldo's mind and remembers that the trick is to relax your hand before hitting the enemy to pull off a critical hit each time. Now the 20% makes sense to Eldo, as that person must have not known something this basic. When Teresa asks if the book was helpful, Eldo hesitantly agrees, and asks her if she knows how to get to the capital. Teresa informs him that he needs to head to the coastal city of Minneton, and take a ferry, but even the cheapest one costs around 3 million gills. But when Eldo asks if there is some other way, she replies that he can work for a big trading firm, or become part of a noble family with connections to the capital, or he could just swim across the sea. But Eldo prefers to save 3 million gills instead. For the time being, he decides to stay in town and earn some money by fighting the monsters. With that being said, he asks Teresa for a request, and she hands him over an E-rank request of hunting lesser wolves. This makes Eldo question if he can take this request, while being an F ranker, to which she agrees, as the request doesn't specify the rank. Realizing that it pays 4,000 gills per elimination, he wonders why the reward is so high and gets told that the request is quite hard. As expected, the coward asks for another request, as he's not in a hurry to take the request above his level. This makes Teresa remind him that he beat the examiner, to which Eldo replies that it was because the examiner went easy on him, while he managed to get a miracle strike. Hearing the word Miracle Strike comes as a shock to Teresa, who tells Eldo that using Miracle Strike means he's an expert. Confused, Eldo figures that everyone should be able to pull off a critical by chance, and to his surprise, Teresa begins pressuring him to take another request that is a C-rank one. Realizing that she wants to see him 6 feet underground, he ends up finding one for himself, and makes Teresa process it for him. She mentions that he doesn't need to do anything but bully a few rabbits, and that it should be safe. But at the same time, he can never be too careful, and advises him to prepare himself as much as possible. After asking her the location of the second forest, he heads out the guild and runs into the examiner, who calls him the strongest novice, asking if he's heading out to bag some town chicks. Eldo replies, saying that he's not the strongest, and lets him know that he took a request to hunt rabbits in the second forest. He further adds that Teresa told him that this job should be safe when he rejected the higher ranked ones she gave to him earlier. With that being said, the examiner wishes him luck and walks away, while Eldo agrees to do his best as well. Before long, he arrives at the second forest, and decides not to underestimate the enemies, even if they are distant cousins of Bugs Bunny. After walking through the forest, he starts to hear some rustling around him, and wonders if he saw a rabbit, only to later realize that it looks more like a lesser wolf. But to his surprise, the wolf brought all the homies along, and without wasting any time, they started charging him. Eldo begins cursing Teresa for telling him that it's safe, and figures that he can't run away. His only choice is to fight back the 6 enemies charging straight towards him. After getting into position, he dodges their attack in the nick of time, and before they even get the chance to attack again, Eldo easily manages to cut one of the wolves. Afterward, it doesn't take him long to cut down the other one as well. He figures that creating as many one-on-one situations as possible, while fighting multiple enemies, is the key, and continues cutting down the remaining wolves. Before long, he's done and notices that his body feels a bit lighter, which makes him wonder if he leveled up. As he's not sure if this world has a leveling system, Eldo decides to test it, and uses a skill named Reinforced Stone Throw to throw a stone forward. That stone hits the tree and manages to damage the trunk quite a lot, making him realize that he can now use level 2 skills, which means this is a level up. With that being said, he decides to head back and give Teresa a piece of his mind. After returning back to the guild, Eldo shows Teresa the corpse of a wolf, asking if the guild calls this a rabbit. Surprised, she mentions that there shouldn't be any lesser wolves in the Kick Rabbit Forest. Eldo lets her know that this is the first time he's heard of the Kick Rabbit. Of the Kick Rabbit Forest, to which Teresa replies that she told him to head to the Kick Rabbit Forest earlier. But if he defeated lesser wolves, that means he ended up going to the second forest instead. Eldo figures that she's playing dumb and accepts his mistake, asking Teresa to cancel the request. But just then, Teresa mentions that she accidentally filled in the procedures for the order of hunting the wolves by accident, asking if he defeated the wolves already. Annoyed by her third-rate acting skills, he lets her know that he managed to defeat 6 of them, causing Teresa to tell Eldo that he will get a total of 120,000 gil for it. After seeing this much dough for the first time in his life, Eldo ends up forgiving Teresa and figures that she must have given him a request with the highest amount that is suitable for his strength. The next day, Eldo pays a visit to the nearby blacksmith shop, wanting to replace his dollar store sword with a real one this time. Eldo is aware that he needs good weapons to make up for his lack of stats in the future, but after seeing the store filled with nothing but shabby-looking swords, he asks the owner if he's got some better ones. Luckily, the show owner shows him an expensive one, and after trying it out, Eldo realizes that it's a pretty good sword and ends up purchasing it. With that, Eldo is once again as broke as a crypto investor and visits the guild again, asking if there are any more requests for wolves slaying, to which Teresa agrees, saying that they still have 32 left in the request limit.
Piece
She
of
further
crap.
elaborates that he will only get a reward for slaying 32 of them, and won't be rewarded past this amount. Following that, he asks to take another request, and when Teresa reminds him of the limit, Eldo lets her know that eliminating 32 wolves will only take 2 hours, and he doesn't want to come back to the guild to take another request afterward. Eldo then begins looking at the requests and realizing that his power is probably around E rank. He ends up choosing a request to slay spear mice, which Teresa thinks is a perfect job for him. Later that day, he is done slaying all 32 wolves and decides to complete the next request, that is spear mouse slaying. Before long, he arrives at the spear mouse forest where all the little rodents live and notices that it looks a little different from how Teresa explained. Just then, he sees one of the spear mice and figures that this must be the hunting ground. Without wasting any time, he reaches for his sword when suddenly, the mouse begins screaming its alarm, followed by squeaks of several other mice coming from every direction. Eldo begins to wonder if it called its friends, and just by hearing the noise, he realizes that he can't tell if there were 20 of them or more. However, before they all gather, he decides to reduce the number as much as he can, and eliminates the first mouse. While the mice are pretty weak on their own, right now, there are more of them than dudes lining up outside a pleasure room. Eldo is aware that with that many enemies, he will take damage no matter what, but at the same time, he has no other choice but to fight. Soon after, the mice begin dashing towards Eldo, and he starts slashing them once by once. Unfortunately, one of them manages to cut Eldo's arm, but an injury like this is barely for him, and even if there are this many enemies, there are some skills he can use to defeat them efficiently. As soon as the number of attacks start to increase, Eldo uses the skill called Self-Cure to heal all the wounds and continues defeating the rest of the mice while making sure to heal up from time to time. After the heal, Teresa gets surprised hearing that he slayed 276 mice, but Eldo is sure that she must be acting this time as well. Nonetheless, he informs her that the one mouse he spotted called its friends, but Teresa lets him know that they are not that kind of monster. When Eldo asks if they aren't E-rank because a lot of them gather, she replies that they don't gather by the hundreds, and after taking a closer look at the material, she realizes that it's from army spear mice. Apparently, it's a different monster, as an army spear mouse is C-rank. Eldo questions if he failed the quest, and Teresa lets him know that going against a group of army spear mice means certain death. Knowing that there's no point worrying about it now, he asks if she can change the request to an army spear mouse, but Teresa refuses. But at the same time, she lets him know that the material from spear mice goes for a high price, and that he will receive 20,000 gil for each material he gathered. With that being said, Eldo receives 2 bags full of coins, and ends up